My fiancée declared, "Your parents can only come to the wedding if they give us $50,000. I replied, "Fair request." Then I sent the recordings to both families and returned her ring. Her mother's furious voicemail demanding an explanation. 10 days ago, I was engaged to be married. Today, I'm sitting in my temporary apartment alone, phone blowing up with texts and calls I'm not answering, wondering how I missed so many red flags. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Rachel and I met 3 years ago through a mutual friend's backyard barbecue. She was smart, funny, ambitious, and drop-dead gorgeous. The kind of woman who makes you do a double take when she walks into a room. We hit it off immediately, traded numbers, and went on our first date a week later. The relationship progressed normally. Dating, meeting friends, meeting family, moving in together after a year. I proposed on our second anniversary with a ring I'd saved 6 months for. Nothing extravagant by celebrity standards, but it was a good quality diamond in a setting she'd once pointed out in a jewelry store window. The look on her face when I gave it to her seemed genuinely thrilled. We set the wedding date for this coming October, about 11 months from now. Or at least that was the plan until last week. Let me give you some background on our families because it becomes relevant. My parents are solidly middle class. Dad's a retired high school teacher. Mom works as a nurse. They live in the same modest 3-bedroom house I grew up in. Drive sensible cars they keep until they fall apart, and take one nice vacation every couple years. They're the definition of financially responsible. Helped me through college so I graduated with minimal loans. Taught me how to budget. All that stuff. Rachel's family is different. Her father owns a successful chain of car dealerships across 3 states. They live in a gated community, vacation internationally several times a year, and her mother has never worked a day in her life. Rachel grew up with household staff and private schools. She's the youngest of 3 kids and the only daughter, so she was pretty spoiled from what I've gathered. Despite our different backgrounds, we've made it work. Rachel has a good job in marketing that she genuinely earned through her own merit. Though I've noticed she never seems concerned about money, likely because her parents have always provided a generous safety net. I'm a civil engineer with a project management role at a mid-sized firm. We both make good salaries, split expenses proportionally to our incomes, and have been saving for the wedding and our future. Our apartment lease is in both our names, with me as the primary leaseholder, since Aunt I moved in first and Rachel joined me later. The first sign of trouble came about 2 months ago, when we started seriously planning the wedding. What I thought would be a nice event for about 100 people at a local venue started morphing into something much bigger. Rachel and her mother started talking about 250 plus guests, a high-end hotel ballroom, designer dress, the works. The budget we discussed nearly tripled. When I expressed concern about the cost, Rachel assured me her parents had always planned to contribute significantly to their daughter's wedding. That seemed reasonable, so I backed off a bit. We hadn't formally discussed finances with either set of parents yet, but Rachel seemed confident. Fast forward to last week. We had dinner scheduled with my parents to discuss their contribution to the wedding. I wasn't expecting much, maybe $5,000 if they could swing it, and I would have been grateful for whatever they could do. I certainly wasn't going to pressure them either way. The night before this dinner, Rachel and I had a conversation that completely blindsided me. "So, about tomorrow," she said while we were getting ready for bed. "I think we need to be clear with your parents about our expectations." "What expectations?" I asked. "They'll contribute what they're comfortable with. We can't demand anything." She gave me this look like I was being naive. "Everyone knows the bride's family pays for the wedding, and the groom's family handles the rehearsal dinner. But since we're having such a large wedding, they need to step up with a significant contribution." "Define significant," I said, already feeling uncomfortable with where this was heading. 50,000? I nearly choked. 50,000? Rachel? There's no way they have that kind of money. They own their house, don't they? They could take out a home equity loan. I was stunned. "I'm not asking my retired father to go into debt for our wedding. That's insane." "It's not insane. It's tradition," she countered. "My parents are already covering most of the wedding. Your family needs to contribute their fair share." Fair share doesn't mean equal amounts when our families have completely different financial situations. I tried to reason. That's when she dropped the bomb. "If they can't contribute properly, then maybe they shouldn't be at the wedding. We can just tell people they're ill or something." I thought she was joking at first. The look on her face quickly told me she wasn't. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You want to ban my parents from our wedding if they don't give us $50,000. Not ban them. They're choosing not to be part of it if they don't contribute. That's on them, not us." I was speechless. This couldn't be the woman I'd proposed to. "We're not discussing this anymore tonight. I need to think." There's nothing to think about, she snapped. Just make it clear to them tomorrow. They're either in or they're out. She rolled over and went to sleep like she hadn't just suggested extorting my parents. I, on the other hand, didn't sleep at all. Something felt very wrong. This wasn't just about the money. It was her attitude, the entitlement, the callousness toward my family. It made me think back to other incidents I'd brushed off. Comments about my clothes not being nice enough for dinner with her friends. Remarks about upgrading to a better apartment once we were married. Suggestions that I should be more aggressive about promotions at work. By morning, I'd made a decision. I didn't confront Rachel, but I did something I've never done before in our relationship. I checked the recording laws in our state first. We live in a one-party consent state. Then activated the voice recorder on my phone before we continued the conversation over breakfast. I wasn't planning to use this legally, just to make sure I wasn't misremembering or misinterpreting what had been said about last night. I started, "You weren't serious about my parents not coming to the wedding if they don't contribute $50,000, were you?" "Of course I was serious," she replied, sipping her coffee. "This is our one big day. If they can't make a proper effort, why should they get to be part of it?" "And what exactly are your parents contributing?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "About $150,000, give or take," she said casually, like she was discussing the weather. "But they can afford it, and they only have one daughter." "And your brother's weddings?" "They each got similar amounts. It's just what's expected." "What if my parents offer less? Say $10,000, that's still a lot of money to them." She laughed. Actually laughed. "That's barely enough to cover the bar for an hour. No, it's 50. Or they can watch the video after." I nodded slowly. "Fair request. I'll make it clear tonight." She looked surprised, then pleased. "Good. I'm glad you understand." I understood. All right, far more than she realized. I left for work but couldn't focus on anything. I called my parents and rescheduled our dinner to the following night, claiming a work emergency. Then I called in a favor with a buddy who works in IT security and had him verify the recording was clear and couldn't be claimed to be manipulated. He asked why, but I just told him I'd explain later. That night I acted normally. Rachel had no idea what I was planning. The next day, I called her mother while Rachel was at work. "Hi Sandra, I have a quick question about the wedding budget," I said when she answered. "Of course, dear. What do you need?" "Rachel mentioned you and Robert are contributing about $150,000 to the wedding. I just wanted to confirm that figure before we discuss things with my parents tonight." There was a pause. "I'm not sure where Rachel got that number," she said carefully. "We've always told the kids we'd give them each $30,000 toward their weddings. That's what her brothers received." Interesting. So Rachel had inflated her parents' contribution by $120,000. I see. I said, "And is it also your expectation that my parents contribute $50,000? Another pause. "Heavens no. We'd never presume to tell another family what to contribute. That's entirely up to them. What if they can only afford much less? Say a few thousand. Then that's their gift, and it should be appreciated," Sandra said firmly. "Robert and I know we're fortunate financially. We'd never hold another family to our standards." "Thank you for clarifying, Sandra. That's very helpful." After hanging up, I made another call to a local jeweler to find out my options for returning the engagement ring. I learned that in our state, engagement rings are typically considered conditional gifts that should be returned if the wedding is called off, though I wasn't planning to make a legal issue of it regardless. That evening, I picked up my parents before Rachel got home from work. I explained that I needed to talk to them privately first and asked if we could use their house. They looked confused but agreed. Once we were settled in their living room, I played them the recording of Rachel's breakfast conversation. My mom started crying halfway through. Dad just looked grim. "I'm so sorry." I told them when it finished. I had no idea she felt this way. "Son," my dad said quietly, "is this really the woman you want to spend your life with?" The question hit me hard. "No," I admitted. "I don't think it is." "What are you gonna do?" Mom asked, wiping her eyes. "End it tonight." I took a deep breath. "But first I need one more recording." I called Sandra again, this time putting her on speaker and telling her I was with my parents. I wanted to follow up on our conversation about wedding contributions. I said, "My parents are a bit concerned about what's expected of them." "As I said earlier, whatever they're comfortable with is perfectly fine," Sandra replied. "Robert and I would never want anyone to feel pressured, even if it's nowhere near $50,000. I prompted $50,000. Sandra sounded shocked. "Where on earth did that figure come from?" "From Rachel," she said. "My parents either need to contribute $50,000 or they shouldn't bother coming to the wedding." The silence that followed was deafening. "I don't know what to say," Sandra finally responded. That's absolutely not how Robert and I feel. I'm horrified that Rachel would suggest such a thing. Thank you for clarifying, Sandra, I said. I think there's been some miscommunication somewhere. After hanging up, I hugged my parents and asked them to stay home. I'll handle this myself, I assured them. This isn't your burden. I drove back to our apartment and waited for Rachel. When she arrived, I was sitting at the kitchen table with her engagement ring in front of me. What's going on? She asked, eyeing the ring. Where are your parents? They're not coming, I said calmly. And neither am I. What are you talking about? I placed my phone on the table and played both recordings. First, our breakfast conversation, then the call with her mother. Rachel's face went from confusion to shock to anger. You recorded me? She hissed when it was finished. That's a violation of my privacy. No, it's a protection against your lies, I countered. You told me your parents were giving us $150,000 when they actually committed to $30,000. You demanded my parents go into debt for $50,000 or be excluded from our wedding. Then you lied about it to your mother. I didn't lie, she sputtered. I just anticipated. My parents always give more than they initially offer. Sandra seemed pretty clear about the amount, and she was horrified about your ultimatum to my family. You had no right to go behind my back, she shouted. And you had no right to try to extort my parents. I shot back. The wedding is off, Rachel. So is our engagement. Her demeanor changed instantly. The anger transformed into tears. You can't be serious. We can work this out. I was just stressed about the wedding costs. No, you showed me who you really are. Someone who sees my family as an ATM, who lies to get what she wants, who values money over people. I'm grateful I found out now instead of after we were married. Please, she begged, reaching for my hand. I love you. I'll apologize to your parents. We can have a smaller wedding. It's not about the size of the wedding, I said, pulling my hand away. It's about respect and honesty. You've shown me you don't value either. I slid the ring toward her. I've already packed some essentials. I'll stay with a friend tonight and come back for the rest of my things when you're at work tomorrow. Since both our names are on the lease, we'll need to decide who stays and who goes. You have until the end of the month to decide if you're moving out or taking over the lease. I'm fine either way. She stared at the ring, then at me. You're making a huge mistake. No, I said, standing up. I almost made a huge mistake. I'm fixing it now. I walked out, ignoring her calls after me. As I drove away, my phone started blowing up with texts from Rachel. I turned it off. The next morning, I went back to the apartment as planned. Rachel had left for work, but she'd clearly had a rough night. There were tissues everywhere, an empty wine bottle on the counter, and the ring still sitting untouched on the kitchen table. I packed my things efficiently, took only what was undisputedly mine, and left my tea on the table next to the ring. Then, I blocked Rachel on all social media and on my phone. By that evening, the drama had escalated. Rachel had apparently called her parents in hysterics, telling them some twisted version of events where I had suddenly dumped her over money issues. Sandra called me furious until I offered to send her the recordings. After listening, her tone changed completely. I owe you an apology, she said, sounding deflated. I had no idea Rachel would behave this way. Robert and I didn't raise her to be so mercenary. I think you did your best, I replied. Adults make their own choices. 3 days after the breakup, Rachel's mother left me a voicemail that still haunts me. How dare you humiliate my daughter this way? After all she's done for you, after how she's helped elevate you, she could have had anyone, but she chose you. And this is how you repay her, by recording private conversations and sharing them with everyone. Her father and I demand an explanation. Seems Sandra had switched back to blaming me after Rachel worked on her. I didn't respond. Rachel's father called next. Unlike his wife, he was calm and measured. I've heard the recordings, he said. I'm not happy about how this has all transpired, but I understand your decision. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. This isn't how we raised her. It's been a week now. I've moved in with my buddy temporarily while I look for a new place. Word has spread among our friend group with people predictably taking sides. Those who know the full story are supportive of my decision. Those who've only heard Rachel's version think I'm a monster who ambushed her and recorded her without consent. I haven't bothered to defend myself except to those closest to me. The truth has a way of coming out eventually. My parents have been incredibly supportive. Dad helped me move and Mom keeps sending me home-cooked meals. They both tell me how proud they are of how I handled things, though I know they're sad too. They genuinely liked Rachel before all this. Yesterday, I ran into Rachel's best friend Megan at the grocery store. I tried to avoid her, but she cornered me by the produce. You broke her heart, she accused. She broke mine first, I replied. Did she tell you why we broke up? She said you got cold feet and made up some excuse about wedding costs. I laughed humorlessly. Ask her about the $50,000 ultimatum for my parents. Ask her about lying about her own parents' contribution. Better yet, ask her mother. Megan looked uncertain for the first time. What are you talking about? I have recordings, I said. Happy to share them if you really want the truth. She didn't take me up on the offer, but she didn't look so certain anymore either. The hardest part in all this has been grieving the relationship I thought I had. The Rachel I fell in love with was kind, thoughtful, and genuine, or so I believed. Now I'm left wondering if that person ever really existed, or if I just saw what I wanted to see. I keep thinking about all the little comments over the years that I dismissed, the subtle digs at my family's modest home, the way she'd sometimes talk about her wealthy friends with a hint of envy, the suggestions that I should be earning more by now. The signs were there. I just didn't want to read them. Some people have asked if I regret ending things so abruptly without trying to work it out. I don't. The ultimatum about my parents wasn't just a red flag. It was a flashing neon sign. Anyone who could even consider banning my family from our wedding unless they paid an extortionate amount doesn't share my values. That's not something counseling can fix. As for the recordings, I know some people think it was underhanded. Maybe it was. But when your instincts tell you something seriously wrong, sometimes you need evidence for others, but mostly for yourself. Without those recordings, I might have let Rachel manipulate me into believing I'd misunderstood or overreacted. So, here I am, starting over at 32, single, temporarily homeless, and fielding angry messages from my ex's family and friends. But you know what? I still think I made the right call. The wedding would have cost me a lot more than money in the long run. Edit. Since so many have asked, yes, I live in a one-party consent state, so the recordings were completely legal. And no, I haven't sent them to anyone except my parents and Rachel's parents when requested. I'm not trying to humiliate her publicly. Edit 2. Several people have suggested I should have seen this coming because she comes from money. That's unfair. I've known plenty of wealthy people who are kind and grounded. This wasn't about her background, it was about her character. Update 1 month later. First off, thanks to everyone for the support. I didn't expect this post to get so much attention, but reading your comments has helped me feel less crazy about my decision. A lot has happened in the past month. I found my own apartment. Nothing fancy, but it's close to work and has enough space for me. Getting out of the lease on the old place was surprisingly easy. Rachel's father quietly paid the penalty fee to break the lease, and Rachel decided to move out as well. I didn't ask him to cover the lease penalty, but I'm grateful nonetheless. About a week after my original post, Rachel's mother showed up at my parents' house. My mom called me immediately, and I drove over worried about what might happen. When I arrived, Sandra was sitting in their living room looking uncomfortable. "I owe you all an apology," she said as soon as I walked in. "I've listened to the recording several times now, and I can't defend what Rachel said." Turns out Rachel had been spinning different stories to different people. She told her mother I was being stingy about wedding costs. She told her father I had suddenly developed issues with her family's wealth. She told friends I was controlling, and had secretly resented her background all along. The recordings cut through all that. Sandra admitted she'd been in denial, not wanting to believe her daughter could be so callous. "We spoiled her," Sandra said, her voice breaking. "I see that now, but I never thought she'd try to extort my parents." I finished when she trailed off. She nodded, looking ashamed. "Robert and I are getting her into therapy. This isn't just about your relationship. It's about who she's becoming." I appreciated Sandra's honesty, but it was too late to change anything between Rachel and me. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. As for Rachel herself, she's gone through several phases since the breakup. First came anger, furious texts and emails about how I'd betrayed and humiliated her. Then denial, messages claiming she never meant what she said, that I'd misunderstood. Then bargaining offers to go to couples therapy, to have whatever kind of wedding I wanted, to sign a prenup, giving me protection from her family's money. When none of that worked, she tried one last tactic: confession. She sent me a long email admitting everything, explaining she'd been caught up in wedding pressure and social expectations, that she'd been trying to impress her wealthy friends with an extravagant wedding. She claimed she never would have actually banned my parents, that it was just an empty threat made in frustration. Maybe some of that is true, but I can't unhear what I heard, and I can't unfeel the shock and revulsion I felt in that moment. Some bells can't be unrung. The friend group has largely stabilized. Those who initially took Rachel's side have mostly come around after hearing bits and pieces of the truth from various sources. I haven't shared the recordings widely, but I did let my closest friend listen after he was bombarded with Rachel's version of events. Holy was all he said afterward. "You made the right call." Rachel moved back in with her parents temporarily. According to mutual friends, she's telling people she's taking time to reassess her priorities after our breakup. I hope that's true. Despite everything, I don't wish her ill. I just wish she'd been the person I thought she was. My parents have been my rock through all of this. Dad keeps telling me I dodged a bullet, and Mum has been quietly setting me up with the daughters of her friends. I'm not ready to date yet, but I appreciate the normality of it all. The engagement ring is still with Rachel as far as I know. I told her to keep it or sell it. I don't care either way. Some people have said I should have demanded it back since the wedding was called off. And legally, I might have had a case in our state where engagement rings are typically considered conditional gifts. But honestly, I just want to move forward. Fighting over material things would only prolong the connection. So that's where things stand. I'm rebuilding one day at a time. I've thrown myself into work, started going to the gym regularly again, reconnected with friends I'd somewhat neglected during my relationship. The pain isn't gone, but it's different now. Less sharp, more hollow. What surprises me most is the relief. I didn't realize how much tension I'd been carrying, how many little compromises I'd been making until I stopped. It's like putting down a heavy backpack you've been wearing so long you forgot it was there. A wise person in the comments said something that stuck with me. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Rachel showed me who she was. I believed her, and painful as it was, I'm grateful for that moment of clarity. Because as much as this experience cost me, staying would have cost so much more. Final update, 6 months later. I wasn't planning to post again, but I've received so many messages asking for an update that I figured I'd share where things stand 6 months after the breakup. Life has settled into a new normal. My apartment feels like home now. Work is going well. I actually got promoted last month, partly because I've been so focused on my projects as a way to distract myself. My family and true friends have been unwavering in their support. I ran into Rachel at a mutual friend's birthday party last weekend, our first face-to-face meeting since the breakup. I'd known she might be there but decided to go anyway. I refused to let her presence dictate my choices. When we saw each other, there was an awkward moment of recognition across the room. She looked different, thinner, more subdued somehow. After about an hour of careful avoidance, she approached me when I was alone by the drinks table. "You look good," she said simply. "Thanks. So do you?" She twisted her hands together nervously. "I've been in therapy twice a week." "That's good," I replied, not sure what else to say. "I want you to know I understand now why you left," she continued. "I wouldn't have stayed either if the situation was reversed." I nodded, surprised by her candor. "My therapist says I've spent my life equating money with love," she added. "It's how my parents showed affection. It's messed up my perceptions." "That makes sense," I acknowledged. "But it doesn't excuse what you tried to do to my family." "No, it doesn't," she agreed quietly. "Nothing excuses that. I'm just trying to understand why I did it, so I don't repeat the pattern." We talked for a few more minutes. It wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. Just two people who once meant everything to each other, now trying to be civilized adults. As for her family, things have developed there too. Her father called me about 2 months ago, asking to meet for coffee. I was hesitant, but agreed. Robert is an imposing man, successful, confident, used to being in charge. But when we met, he seemed humbled. "I failed as a father," he said bluntly over his coffee. "I taught my sons the value of hard work. But with Rachel, I just gave anything she wanted. I thought I was showing love, but I was creating entitlement. I didn't know how to respond to that." "I'm not asking you to reconsider your decision," he continued. "What's done is done, but I wanted you to know we're trying to help her change." He also mentioned that they've scaled back financially. No more unlimited credit cards. Rachel has had to budget for the first time in her adult life. She moved into her own apartment recently, more modest than what she's used to, and she's paying for it herself with her marketing salary, which is substantial but no longer supplemented by her parents. Some mutual friends think I should give her another chance now that she's showing signs of growth. I don't see that happening. Too much was revealed. Too much trust was broken. I believe people can change, but I don't believe I have to be the one to witness that change up close. On my end, I've started dating again. Nothing serious yet, just casual dinners and getting to know new people. I'm more cautious now, more observant of how potential partners treat service staff, how they talk about money, how they react when plans change or things don't go their way. Small indicators that reveal character. I still have the recordings, though I haven't listened to them in months. They served their purpose. They gave me clarity when I needed it most, helped me resist gaslighting, allowed me to explain to those closest to me why I made the choice I did. But they're also a reminder of a painful time, and I've considered deleting them to fully move on. The wedding date we'd set would have been last month, October 16th. I took the day off work, half expecting to feel depressed. Instead, I went hiking with a couple of friends, climbed to a spectacular viewpoint, and felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude that I trusted my instincts. Gratitude for the people who stood by me. Gratitude even for the painful experience itself, which taught me what I will and won't accept in a relationship. Someone asked me recently if I regret the relationship with Rachel. I don't. For most of our time together, she made me happy, and I believe I did the same for her. What happened at the end doesn't negate the good parts. It just revealed an incompatibility so fundamental that no amount of love could overcome it. I also don't regret ending things the way I did. The recordings were my insurance policy against what followed. The denials, the twisted narratives, the attempts to make me question my own perception. They allowed me to stand firm when the pressure to reconcile was most intense. So that's my story. Not the happily ever after I'd planned, but not a tragedy either. Just life with all its unexpected turns and hard-earned wisdom. If there's a lesson in all this, maybe it's about paying attention to the small things, the offhand comments, the values revealed in casual decisions, the way someone treats people they don't need something from. Because eventually those small things become the big things that can't be ignored. Or maybe the lesson is simpler than that. When someone tells you who they are, whether in words or actions, believe.